Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Welcome to the Eating in a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath of Thrive Meetings and Events. In today's episode, I'm talking to Stepheni Norton, a farmer from San Diego, California, who I met a few years ago at the Slow Food Nations conference in Denver. I loved what she was doing then, and I love it even more now. Her journey from being a chief yeoman in the U.S. Coast Guard to now a Southern California farmer of pre-World War II fruits, vegetables, and herbs began with a dream and an insect bite. Learn how she and her husband are taking their farm to help manage Stepheni's health and those in their community as well. Enjoy the show. So tell me what you do with Slow Food?
Sure. So our farm is Heirloom Farm and an Arc of Taste farm.
Right.
So everything we grow is heirloom. We take that a step further and just say pre-World War II. So it's, a lot of people say 50 years. We just push it back to pre-World War II. And then right now we're growing about 50% Arc of Taste. And each season we do another test bed to see what we can grow here and switch out from just heirloom to Arc of Taste. And then with that, we're a part of the Slow Food Arc of Taste seed group to really try to get more seeds pushed back into the marketplace. And then we're actually only the fifth farm to have the Airbnb slow food experiences in the United States.
Good for you.
All the other ones are actually all over Europe and none are here. So we were pretty happy to get that put in place, even though we had to put a extreme halt on them right now. We're restricting all access to the farm. So everything we're doing is delivery right now. We're not allowing any public access until we kind of get through this.
So Slow Food was started in 1986 by a couple of Italian gentlemen when they saw the first McDonald's go into the center of Rome. And so they were flabbergasted that this fast food joint, came into their historic town, basically. And so they created an organization with the symbol of a snail called Slow Food to basically introduce or reintroduce where food comes from, educating people of the indigenous food of their land, of their regions, and of their countries, as well as to, just cooking real food versus eating, that other stuff.
Right.
There's hundreds of organizations around the country, chapters around the country. The U.S. has state chapters, city chapters, but they also have Slow Food USA, which the chapters report up to, kind of. And every year, or I think it's going into this fourth or fifth year, is Slow Food Nations, which is an event that's held in Denver, this downtown city of Denver. Slow Food Terra Madre Salon del Gusto, which is Slow Food's biannual food festival in Turin, Italy. And the first year that I went was 16, and it was the first year they did it outside. They had over 1 million attendees. And it was over the course of, 4 days or something like that. Education, food from all over the world, resources about, soil health and farm health and things like that. So that's anything I need to add to that?
No, so the local chapters, what they really focus on is kind of the boots on ground implementation of the slow food mission, which is, clean, safe food for all. So a lot of each chapter will implement that slightly differently. Here in San Diego, for years, the only part of it that they were focusing on is the for all. So they were really focusing on food justice. This year, they've increased their board, and we have Slow Beer this year. We have Arc of Taste this year, which is great. Specifically gathering events, which is, ironic right now.
Right.
But they're really each slow food chapter, just based on kind of what's going on in the area and the interests of the community, will take parts of the slow food mission and kind of implement them accordingly.
Okay. So, and then will you explain to her what Arc of Taste is?
Sure. So Arc of Taste is a list that was put out originally by Slow Food International, and it's a list of seeds, animals, and recipes that will go extinct if we don't make a change. So think of it like the extinction list for animals. These are going to be the extinction list for food animals, all seeds, as well as some recipes, and indigenous, both indigenous seeds and recipes and animals, as well as across the board, like within the US, things that we see. Not all of them are specific to one place. So this list is put together, and it's out on the website, and you can buy seeds. There's a lot of seed companies that are actually growing these seeds to keep them out of extinction. And the hope is that we would grow them and keep them within the marketplace. The reason a bunch of them have actually gone to the level of extinction is because most of these don't really fit into the traditional agriculture and commerce model, where we grow a lot of food and then we transport it. So a good example is the Cherokee purple tomato. It's a beautiful, beautiful tomato. We grow it, but if you pick it when it's actually ripe, the skin is very thin, and it just wouldn't. There's no way it would travel. So it's definitely something that you would eat locally. And a majority of these seeds have either gone out of the marketplace because of things like that. They just don't transport well, or maybe they're traditional flavors, so the apple isn't quite as sweet as an apple as we would have today. And then some other have actually gone to the level of extinction. I call it like the grandma theory. So if your grandma didn't tell you a recipe, it's going to go extinct when she passes away. So a lot of these, because indigenous people, communities never really documented the recipe or how to caretake for an animal or how to take care of the seed and make sure that it grows if it's very local specific, that we're losing those. So a lot of people are doing things on recipes. A lot of people are doing these history work to actually gather the information and then put these recipes back out there and have them be used, or regrow these seeds so we can keep them in the marketplace, or, raise and ranch these animals so we can keep them without going extinct.
Wow. I'm so glad somebody is doing that. That is amazing.
And then certainly, it's a part of biodiversity, right? So by having biodiversity, we have a safer food system. That's, really key right now. And these Arc of Taste varietals are hopefully bringing us back to, where we don't have 10 different apples that are traditional in the marketplace. We have the 600 that are available, right? So that's kind of a loftier goal and kind of a bigger end goal, but it really is giving us greater diversity. So if we do have crop failure, we don't have all crop failure, where we lose all of the corn in the United States, that we lose maybe a farm or two or one varietal. So giving us that biodiversity and really giving us the security in our food system.
When I was trying to think of 10 women who do this, I mean, just the thought that you opened this farm because of the autoimmune diseases that you do and you're growing heirloom, I think that's just remarkable. So can you talk about that?
We started the farm, bought the property that we're on, which is a historic piece of property and a historic home, in 2012. And we bought it as our forever home. It met all the kind of check boxes of this dreamy idea that we had when we first started dating many years prior to that, of having this place in Southern California. We're both SoCal kids, that just gave us some land, which is really not something that happens for most, middle income Southern California kids. Right. We're used to having kind of traditional, small housing lots. So we wanted some land. We wanted a house that was big enough for ourselves and our family and friends when they visited. We wanted, all these things. We wanted some character and history, and we wanted a view of the ocean, which was comical based on being a military family. We knew we could never really afford that. But we kind of put it down in writing, and we said, this is the life plan that we're building together. And both my husband and I are, military planners. So it kind of goes down that path. And it took us a few years, but we stumbled upon this house and this property, and it's an 1888 Victorian. It met all of our size and structure and location desires, and it needed love. It really needed to have some life put back into it, and the land was just shy of an acre. So we bought the property knowing that this would be our forever home, and we just really looked at it as we're this generation's caretaker for this property. It's a historically registered house, and it really needed to be brought back to life for us and the community. I left for deployment soon after we bought the property, and when I left for Coast Guard deployable operations, yeah. So my deployment was to Guantanamo Bay for the detention center, so the Joint Task Force. And just prior to leaving, I got bit by a tick. We didn't know that at the time. We just knew that I was starting to get sick. And the military's perspective was I had a plane to catch. So whatever was going on, I needed to figure it out on my own. And it was frightening, but the other side of it was in a high op tempo environment, you just put your head down and do it. You kind of push through a lot of stuff that I think, outside of that environment, a person probably wouldn't push through. So I left for deployment, already ill, and I was gone for, the pre-deployment workup was about 8 months, and then I was gone for just shy of a year. And when I came back at that point, there were days that I couldn't walk. And that I couldn't move my body. I had lost control of the left side. And all of this time, we had no idea what was going on at all. So when I got back, we finally pushed to have the Coast Guard send me to a bunch of outside doctors. Lyme literacy it's certainly better now than it was in 2013, 14. But really, unless you had been on the East Coast or anywhere else that ticks were prevalent, most doctors didn't know about it. So it took about another year. And we finally got a misdiagnosis, which led us to a doctor who ran the right tests. And we finally found out that I had Lyme disease as well as co-infections. At that point, I had stage 3 Lyme, which means it breaks the blood-brain barrier, and I'll have it for the rest of my life. And I we started daily IV treatment right away of antibiotics and antibacterial and antivirals to really fight Lyme disease as well as the co-infections. And what I started noticing is I was having counter interdictions with my food. And at first, my doctor was like, hey, just eat really clean. Don't drink, don't smoke. I never smoked. I'm a sailor. I will tell you I drank. But he was like, just be smart, right? Take care of your body because we're fighting this bacteria and we're fighting this infection, and we don't want to have to also fight everything else, like the environment, what you're eating. So I did that, but I was still really struggling. I was coming up with counter interdictions that I had never had in my life. When I ate corn, I would get, like a body tick. My legs would start cramping pretty quickly. I would get a facial tick from it. And that's crazy. I mean, as a California kid, we've all grown up with, 3-rolled tacos at midnight. That's just what we do here. So it was very, very strange to me. And I said to my doctor, I'm just going to grow my own food. And that was definitely the frustrated kind of type A person in me. And my doctor half laughed and patted my husband and said, don't let her kill herself, because this is insane. And I have zero experience. I grew up in Southern California. I would tell you, I still can't grow like roses or anything like that. But I just did it. My family built these raised beds so I could sit on them because I still had trouble walking and squatting. And I started growing my own food. And it helped. but we were noticing that I was still having counter interdictions, and I was getting more and more frustrated. It just didn't make sense to me. Like as a very linear thinker, it was like, I am following the directions. There's a rule book. I'm following it. It's still not working. There must be something I'm doing wrong. So I was spending 5 to 7 hours in the IV chair. And for me, it was, everybody deals with it different. People are like, watch videos all day, do this, do that. And I was like, I can't like find the end of the internet every day. So I really just started researching like food sensitivities. And I knew it wasn't an allergy, like an anaphylactic shock allergy, right? Because I was still alive. But I kept on just researching more and more about food and things that seemed kind of anecdotal before, when people would talk about genetically modified food, or, you only have to worry about organic with the dirty dozen and all these kind of things that we hear. I started reading a lot about highly hybridized food and genetically modified food. And it was interesting to me that people were saying there wasn't a difference when we knew that there was a histamine response that was different, right? So the studies had shown that the only thing that was really different is it was an increased histamine response. So I thought, well, that's fine if you're a really healthy person with no compromised immune system and don't have anything, and your body's fighting stuff off, that's probably fine. It's probably a couple of sneezes that you get after you eat something if you have a sensitivity to it. But for me, I was having pretty significant responses. And I thought, well, what if I try heirloom varieties? Like, what if I just try that with corn? Because everybody's different and I don't know, maybe that'll work for me. So we planted a small bed of corn, which how we planted it would tell you that we had no idea what we were doing, because we planted it in a 2-foot high raised bed and the wind would catch it and we had to hand pollinate it. It was the most cared for corn on the earth. I mean, it was just insane. But when we were done, my dad and I stood outside getting ready to try it. And my husband said, if this doesn't work, we're done, right? Like, we're done with trying the things to find a solution for what you're having sensitivities to. You're just not going to eat it anymore. And at this point, we had already had my medicine compounded because there's a lot of corn as fillers. Mm-hmm. I had stopped using makeup. I had to change all my body soaps. I mean, so many things had corn in them.
Yep.
And it's crazy. I mean, the things you learn, right? Mm-hmm. So we stood outside and we ate the corn and I didn't have a reaction at all. And I didn't have a reaction for the next couple of days. Like, there was nothing. And before, I would eat corn and within a few minutes, you'd be able to see the facial tick. And then, within an hour or so, I'd have the cramping on my left side. And I was like, this is crazy. And then I ate some more and I didn't have a reaction. And then we waited and I ate traditional corn and I had a reaction. So I was like, okay, this may be anecdotal to a shit ton of people, excuse my language.
Right.
Other people may not have a response at all, and good for them. But for me and my body, this is a thing. Right. This is real. And we turned around and we pulled out the crops and started planting all heirloom.
Wow.
And just we're like, this is what we're doing. And we look at it that it matters for me, and we started growing for me. And there's other people like me that it matters to, or it matters for. And if it doesn't matter for you from like a sensitivity perspective, it's really amazing food. I mean, the flavors are awesome. So there's no real negative to us doing it.
And that was, what year was that?
So we started growing in 2014 and we went completely heirloom by 2015.
And then from that, how long did it take you to do it for yourself to then start the CSA? CSA is community supported agriculture, where, and I don't know if you get a farmer box, every week, or that you just cook the food that's in the farmer box. So they started that.
So we went to market late 2016 and really kind of early in 2015, we were still growing for me. And then the Coast Guard was starting to talk about a med board. And we knew that meant that I would likely be retired. We weren't sure. I think for me, I really thought that I would stay in, that I would go through this, get healthy, and go back, and just be deployed again. My husband says he was like, there were days you couldn't even walk. And I was like, I don't know. It made sense in my head. Like, you just get fixed and go back. But we, about summer, it was really looking on the horizon that I was going to retire. And I was kind of dumbfounded. I didn't know what to do. So I had a little background on my military. I was in the military right out of high school in the Navy, and I went in during the LA riots. So there was no documentation. We all just shipped out. And I ended up being erroneously discharged for a medical condition that wasn't mine. So I had all these incorrect papers and was too young to know really what was going on. I was barely 18. No, I was 17 when I went. And, everybody there said, well, you can just fix the paperwork when you get home and then come back in. And that's not true. So that was my life plan from the time I was old enough to walk. And I had spent the next, literally 20 years trying to get back in. So I had already built businesses. I had a global services firm at that point and had finally found the recruiter willing to do the paperwork to correct my records and put me back in. So I joined the military very late in life and really thought this would be the rest of my life and planned on it being the rest of my life. So when I found out that I was being medically retired, I was it was like somebody hit me over the head with a baseball bat. I couldn't believe that after literally 20 years of work to get here, that a bug the size of a pin tip was going to take it all away from me.
Wow.
And I was dark, I didn't know what to do with my life. It's, when you've spent literally your whole life up into this point making a path plan, this is the path I'm going to go on. And then you find out that all of that is completely irrelevant and you have this new path and you've had no time to really plan for it. So for me, I didn't know what to do. I was in a pretty dark place. And my husband finally talked to me and he's like, look, you joined the service to serve your country. And I need you to do this to serve the community. Take all that energy and serve the community.
Right.
And we did. I mean, I took that energy, good and bad, some days very bad. And thank God I could use a shovel at that point, just digging in the dirt. And I designed out the long rows and, looked at how much food we could actually get off the property and how do you legally start selling food. It's very highly regulated, as it should be, and really built my knowledge base and then turned around and worked with people to build it on the farm and, create a place that we could grow healthy food and get it to the community. And for us, the community is definitely more than our direct neighbors. It's everybody else going through medical issues like I was.
You do boxes for different dietary needs, right?
Right. So we do, we have our CSA, which is a quarterly CSA.
Okay.
Because we found that most people, especially because we really started it for people going through medical treatment, that everybody's life changes very significantly in a quarter when you're going through treatment. So we do it on a quarterly basis. So it's 6 bags over the course of 3 months. And you can do a no restrictions, which is just kind of everything organically grown and clean from the farm. Or then we also have diabetes, Candida, and anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
And with those, we just pull out anything that are typically triggers for people. So for anti-inflammatory, we don't put any lectins or nightshades in it.
Okay.
Those tend to be 2 pretty high trigger items. And then for diabetes, you're not going to get any high sugar, so you wouldn't get any corn or beets. And then Candida is very similar to it's almost a hybrid of both, right? So
Right.
It's low sugar as well as low lectin and nightshades.
So I'm not supposed to eat nightshades as a Candida person?
Some people are really sensitive to them because some nightshades, like if you look at sweet peppers, some of them will have trouble with the amount of sugars that are in them. Tomatoes are high sugar. So if we try to come up with like the most restrictive, we take a most restrictive approach. Some people come back and say, I'd rather, like I'm doing pretty well. So if you could just not put beets and corn in them, that would be great. And then we can kind of, we try not to do a lot of pick to order if we're doing delivery, just because we want to have, it makes it a little easier for the farm, but we can customize too.
Very cool. I'm probably eating the wrong foods for my own body. How do you define food inclusion?
Interesting, because this whole thing for me and then my husband, who has no restrictions and is a heavy meat eater, it was interesting to see how that was going to play out and still keep a sense of connection and community and really be at that table. Right. Because I think we can make sure that everybody can eat, but then there's a way of doing it where we all feel like we're gathering together and we're having that sense of community. And then there's also the way that says, oh, well, you have to eat that. So kind of you eat your meal, I'll eat my meal. And that's not really inclusive anymore. And it feels really disconnecting. And for us and for me, what I wanted was to be able to sit at that table with my family. I had spent so much time being deployed and being away prior to the military with my business that I was like, damn it, I'm home. I want to sit down and eat together. And what I really learned and what we learned as a family is that everybody can kind of give a little bit, and you tend to give towards, for us, we tend to give towards the most restrictive person. So if there's something that will kill me, if it's in the room, it's no different than like a shellfish allergy, right? Like you wouldn't have everybody having all this shellfish and be like, oh, you one person, please don't die. So for us, we take that approach first. And then we also take it as a learning approach, right? So my dad doesn't have, he doesn't admit that he has food sensitivities. But even him, he's old school, right? He likes bread and butter, biscuits and butter with meals. Right. So it was like, okay, well, how can we do that in a way that's safe for everybody? Well, for me, that means using ancient grains, right? Okay. So we just switch the component. When we have our dinners and our events here on the farm, we make sure that we can do vegan and vegetarian. And then even when we do, we had a Father's Day barbecue last year. Well, we don't just say, well, you can eat the side dishes, enjoy that. It's like, well, what can we make that is going to make you feel a part of the community too? And we work with chefs that really come up with some amazing imaginative ways to do that. We had like jackfruit pulled pork tacos.
Yummy.
So really kind of looking at it and saying, okay, wait a second. Stop thinking about what I like and need and start looking at it as like, well, what's going to be an amazing experience and meal for all of us? Because then we all are coming to the table and we're having those conversations and we're learning. And I think, it seems almost like once we get out of that kid zone where, your mom said you have to try it and see if you like it. All of us are like, nope, I don't eat that. It's like, well, do you? Come on, try it. As long as it's not until you try it. And then if there's something that will really harm somebody, let's see if we can find a substitute and we can all learn something about a new thing we can eat or a new thing we can experience.
That's an awesome perspective. What has been your greatest obstacle in all of this?
I think there's two that like pop into my mind. One, I feel like I've figured out. The very beginning, it was just literally navigating the landscape of having a farm business, right? So truly opening a farm, having it being a certified producer, being able to sell to the community, knowing all the regulatory requirements for business and food and how they overlap. I still think that that's really an issue within the small farm industry. I don't feel like we've come up with a great solution on that. I feel like I've worked it out and I'm helping the people around me work it out, but I feel like we need a lot more connections and ease through that process to really create food safety and security within our communities. And we're seeing that now more than ever. But the other part of it was too, is that by being a military service member, and then prior to that being somebody that traveled so much, I didn't have a community at home. So starting a food business where you're trying to connect to a community that, for me, I was traveling a ton prior. So I was very rarely home and very rarely a part of the neighborhood. And then I was sick. So I couldn't physically be out and be around people. I didn't have a healthy immune system. So building something for myself that I knew was going to be important to a community, whatever that community was, while still trying to become my own part of that community, was really difficult. Right. So sometimes it felt super lonely. It felt, there was certainly some imposter syndrome going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the things that I realized is if you're just authentically you, with your stumbles, with your experiences, with like your perspectives, that people can then be authentically them. And that community kind of builds itself.
I love that. That's a great answer, because there's so many things that people don't want to talk about, especially with food. Food is our most common shared thing that we need, that we all have. And so many people are left out of that conversation because they're afraid to tell somebody that they can't eat that, or, for a medical reason, or a religious-based reason. People who just don't like stuff are a lot more apt to tell somebody they don't like it versus somebody who needs to tell you that they can't have it.
Right.
What words of wisdom did your mother, your grandmother, aunts, another woman in your life share with you?
So my mom used to say, this will make me cry. My mom used to say, you have 15 minutes. Yell, scream, cry, kick the floor. Now pull your boots up and get to it. And I think that throughout everything that we've experienced in our life, and the many, many lessons I learned from being sick and having to slow down and having to change my life plan, I go back to that because there are times when, and now with everything going on and businesses are rethinking businesses and families are separated by continents, shake it out, right? Like get it out. Nobody's telling you that your emotions are not valid, but now get to it. Make the change that we're all going to be able to live with moving forward. I mean, there's a benefit of us being a little bit pulled back right now. I've had more meals with my husband than I've probably had in years prior, because both of us are, I'm running outside and he's running to the office. And when the world forces you into something, there's a lesson that has to be learned. And take the opportunity that you need to kind of shake out the anger and fear that happens when we don't know what's around the corner, but then pull your boots up and just see what is there to learn right in front of you now.
I love your mom. Let's see. What has been important to you as a woman in the food and beverage industry?
I really think that for me, being able to see other women as mentors, whether or not they consider themselves mentors, I've learned so much by just kind of taking this. When I first was in it, I felt, again, that imposter syndrome that I think that women tend to feel a lot. I've talked to many men, and well, if they have it, they don't express it to a woman, I guess. But just this idea that you kind of, at first I was like, I'm not really in food and beverage. I'm just growing food. And you're like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. Literally, without the people growing food, there is no food and beverage. So wait a second. But then sitting back and seeing the amazingness that are all these women and what they have to teach us on, juggling a family, or what they have to teach us on creating some new method or recipe, or getting back to basics, but just really seeing the women in the industry and supporting them for all the amazingness that they're putting out there. And that sometimes we just don't take the opportunity to sit back and say to them, I see you. I see how hard this is. I know that it's difficult. I know that you're trying to juggle it all. I know that you're trying to juggle the crap things that happen at work or within your business. But to see how more and more people, more and more women bond together and rise up together and realize that it's, so much better for all of us by us helping each other and bonding together than it would ever be to look at each other as competition and kind of fight through that. And it's just been really amazing to be a part of kind of the San Diego community on that and work with chefs and mixologists and food and beverage business owners, and just see that all of our struggles are very similar. And the benefit of that is that if you feel like you can't figure it out, there's somebody that's willing to say, hey, like, I hear you, I see you, here's some stuff that worked for me, here's some stuff that helped me out. And right now it's been amazing. Like, I wake up, I tend to be an early riser and early to bed. And I have some female friends in the industry that are kind of just opposite. And I'll wake up and see like messages from them, just checking in on you, want to make sure everything's okay. How's the farm looking? How are you feeling? And then I'm shooting mine off early in the morning, so they wake up to them. It's pretty amazing. I'll take that any day over the crazy other posts, right?
Yes, definitely. Oh, right now, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who have been your role models, and what do you admire about them?
So a lot of my role models, I don't know if you will have heard of them.
That's okay.
They're a lot of old cookbook writers from the 17th and 18th century.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So it's interesting because I started on a lark when I was in Gitmo on my deployment when I was sick. I was like reading as much as I could, and we had this random little library that had really odd stuff that people would leave behind. And I was coming across all these old cookbooks. So it got me interested in old cookbooks, and I had liked to cook, at that point. So it wasn't that was really odd, but being able to see all these interesting old cookbooks was amazing to me. So then I started looking online and buying as many as I could. And then I started reading about the cookbook writers.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them were amazing. In fact, almost all of them were amazing businesswomen of the time. Like, they created cooking schools and educational programs. Like A.B. Marshall's created an educational program in London. And then there's the Women's Institute for Domestic Technology, which also created a sewing school. And so there's these women that were of their time being told that they should just be home. And they're like, okay, I got you. And then they just created a structure for other women to learn all these amazing skills and go on to open restaurants and go on to, be these amazing, game-changing women by the nature of starting with a cookbook. And I think it's really inspirational to see. It's like something as simple as putting a meal on the table where, depending on what your perspective is, people are like, oh, that's nothing, that's just eating. But it's like, no, it's not. It's bringing people to the table. It's having the conversation. It's making change.
Everybody that I've been interviewing, it's just like, it's that common thread of bringing everybody to the table. And I just love that because that's what I say all the time as well. What do you look forward to in your work and the food and beverage industry overall?
I would, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I think I definitely would have had a different answer. But right now, I actually really look forward to seeing the amazing pivots that are coming out of what we're going through.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like we're not all just shutting our doors and walking away and kind of hiding. Everybody's saying, how can I be safe? How can I still support my community? How can I still support my customers that have looked for us for things that they need? Whether it's a small local corner store, the restaurant that's going from a restaurant to a new delivery service that they never thought they would do. Farms that have never done a CSA that now all of a sudden they're doing it, or farms that never thought they would ever have a farm stand, and now they're having a farm stand and inviting other farmers to participate in it. I think it's going to be a really amazing time when we see what kind of shakes out within the industry after the end of this.
Yeah.
Because it's forced us to come up with solutions.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the conversation I had about food safety before this is going to really rock the world. Even though COVID is not currently projected to be transmitted through food, it's going to make people rethink how we meet and how we serve food.
Right.
Yeah. What advice would you give to another young woman aspiring who is just starting out into the food and beverage industry?
Sit back, look, listen a lot. Be willing to think outside the box, but also be willing to look historically about the women who came before us. I think sometimes we all jump in and think, we're going to be the one thing that completely changes it, or I can do better than everybody else. And I think there's so much to learn from our ancestors. There's so much to learn from the women that came before us, that it's time to take some quiet reflection and pull that knowledge up.
And the fact that your role models were from cookbooks that you found just reiterates that, of the history of our food, and the fact that you grow heirlooms, which are historical, right?
Right.
And I think that brings all of you together in one fell swoop, right? I mean, you're using historical foods and historical food cookbooks to lead your life going forward, but also looking at what is ahead, right? And I think that's pretty inspiring. Just a funny story on heirlooms. My mom thinks they're the what God created, the most remarkable thing ever. But they're she's very rare, and she's like, I'm going to this one farmer's market to go get my heirloom tomatoes, Tracy, because I can't get them anywhere else. And there's a small farmer who comes to the farmer's market in our small town in North Carolina, and last year he was just doing cherry tomatoes, and I need to ask him if any of them were, heirlooms or whatever. But we'd buy a bunch of them and put them out on the counter, and my dad and I would have eaten them within 3 days because they're so good. But he posted on Instagram that he was growing heirlooms, and I'm like, Mom, you can now get them from the guy at the farmer's market on Sundays. I'm like, and he's like, I'm skipping market because of the flooding that we had with the rain. I'm like, you take care of those tomatoes because I'm waiting for them. Yes, so good. I don't care if you don't come this week, go take care of them.
It's funny that you say that. So I never liked tomatoes. Mm-hmm. I would just never really eat cherry tomatoes. Like if they were on something, it was fine. And when I was a kid, I would go back home to Southern Illinois for the summer and spend it with my grandparents. And my great grandfather grew cherry tomatoes like on the side of his porch. Mm-hmm. So I would want to sit and chat with him. But he's like this old, stodgy, old man, right? Like I'm a little kid and I don't have much to say. Like there's nothing in my life that I could really say. But if I would sit on the porch with him and eat cherry tomatoes, we would talk about life until the cherry tomatoes were gone off the bush.
You're going to make me cry.
I would sit there and eat them with him, even though I didn't like them, because it would give me an opportunity to just sit and talk with him. And now I just think that, I couldn't have asked for a better hand to help me get where I am, to think of just, the things we do to connect back. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that just goes, oh my gosh, my eyes are tearing. That just makes me so happy. What are 5 things that you appreciate about what you do?
I appreciate that I have a home. And I say that meaning because I had spent so much of my adult life around the world, is that I'm finally home. And that means a great deal to me. I appreciate that there is this, I'm looking out to the farm right now, that you can't just walk away from it, right? You can't, it calls to you. There's things that it needs. There's things that you need to learn and hear from it. And that's something that I have the opportunity to do every day. I'm appreciative that I have the opportunity to employ people and really, give them a place that they can learn and grow and contribute to. And I really appreciate my community, and that community is so much bigger than just my neighbors. That I've been given the opportunity to participate in an industry that was never even on my radar. And the people within that industry are pretty amazing. And I'm really just honored to be a part of it.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.